Hi everyone. Today I'm going to return to the days of yesteryear, 50 years ago, my ongoing series of the films of 1973. What movies were like then, when I saw them then, in 1953, when I was in my 20s, and what they look like today. So today I'm going to talk about The Friends of Eddie Coyle, and this is a film directed by Peter Yates, starring Robert Mitchum in one of his most acclaimed performances from the latter part of his career. And it is based on a bestseller by George V. Higgins, George V. Higgins' debut novel. With so many movies of this era, the early 1970s, very successful movies were made from the bestsellers of its time. And The Friends of Eddie Coyle is about a small-time hood played by Robert Mitchum. He's connected to the organized crime, but he's sort of a low-level functionary. He has been caught, he's been arrested, indicted, and sentenced to a two-year term in prison in New Hampshire. The Friends of Eddie Coyle set in Boston. And so he's facing jail time. We see him as he attempts to try to find a way out of that jail time. He's in his 50s, as Mitchum was in 1973. He has a wife, he has 3 children. He just cannot do jail time anymore. This is a very deglamorized version of organized crime, much different than, say, The Godfather the year before. Basically, Eddie Coyle is a gun runner. He makes deals. He finds guns available on the black market, and he sells them to his so-called friends that he is connected to for their nefarious operations, which in the case of this movie is bank robberies. But the movie essentially is a series of conversations, which the book, which I read in the early 70s, I have not read it since. Very dialogue heavy. It was almost entirely, the book was almost entirely in dialogue. Excellent dialogue. And it's basically a series of conversations, a series of deals that are being made for guns, but also for information. It has a flavor, a little bit of a flavor of The Informer, John Ford's Victor McLaglen movie of the Irish IRA in the 1930s, where somebody, in this case Eddie Coyle, is tempted to trade information in order to try to get himself extricated from having to go to prison. Despite the fact that the movie is a series of conversations, dialogue-heavy movie, there is kinetic action. Peter Yates, the director, had success with Steve McQueen's Bullet. He directed Bullet, so we get 2 bank heists here in this film to amp up the tension and amp up the interest in these bank heists. They're very authentic. Peter Yates does a commentary, and he said they did, in fact, have what he called a friend, in quotation marks, who would understand exactly how banks could be robbed. And in fact, it's done in such meticulous detail. It's kind of like a how to rob a bank kind of sequences. And a la Bullet, we have an emphasis on cars. We have a 383 Hemi, painted yellow, that stands out with the low-level gangster who is the gun supplier, and we get a series of very tense standoffs between the police and possible arrests. And it's all this being played out in Boston. This is like the end of October, early November, so late fall. It's a rather drab-looking Boston, and deliberately so. These are not happy people. They're living lives that are on the lower level of organized crime that don't seem to be going much of anywhere. So we get, according to Peter Yates, the entire film was filmed on location, even the interiors. Then we get glimpses of the rich suburbs where the bank managers live, residential sections, very narrow streets, very little room between the houses, but where Eddie Coyle lives, but seems very livable. We get the interior of one of those houses, and we get some of the industrial outskirts of Boston. We get the Charles River, meeting places out in the open between gangsters and possible informers and the people connected to the police department. So it's a series of information between gangsters and between gangsters who are informers and the police officers for whom they are snitching too. And again, friends in the title is used ironically. Mitchum here playing a actor's role, and he was always an adventurous actor, Mitchum, and playing, he enjoyed playing villains, Max Cady in Cape Fear, the preacher in The Night of the Hunter. And it is a ensemble piece. Mitchum is only really in about half the movie. But fortunately, this ensemble piece, these fellow actors are simply superb. Stephen Keats plays his Eddie Coyle's gun-running supplier. Excellent performance. Keats, very recognizable actor from a couple decades of television. This was his first film. He was a stage actor. Peter Yates said that he and his casting director loved to find actors that had appeared on stage. But here's one that, another very recognizable character actor, Alex Rocco. And of course, he was Mo Green in The Godfather the year before. And he is an authentic, his early years, he was an authentic gangster. He was part of the Bunker Hill gang that was Boston that becomes, I think, is the background of Martin Scorsese's The Departed. And he departs from Boston at he just sort of disappeared, went out to Hollywood, became an actor. And according to one of the essays, the gang didn't know what happened to him until they went to see The Godfather. And there's their old buddy, Alex Rocco. Oh, that was a stage name. And part of his group, the bank robbing group, another one is played by Joe Santos, and you would remember him from Lieutenant Becker in Rockford Files. The chief friend of Eddie Coyle's is a bartender who also seems to be wanting to peddle information as well, played by Peter Boyle, the father from Everybody Loves Raymond, but had just recently had a big hit, that independent film called Joe, which he got great notices for. So he was almost like emerging as a film star. In fact, on one of the posters I saw, he's actually named with Robert Mitchum as the stars of the film. He is absolutely great in this film. And then I have to mention Richard Jordan, who plays the police officer who is the conduit for this information. He's the one they go to. Eddie Coyle goes to try to get him his sentence overturned, and the one who Peter Boyle goes to see as well. And so we get a very good sense of very vivid characters performed by some terrific actors. George V. Higgins himself was a prosecuting attorney, and as the Friends of Eddie Coyle was the first of many books, crime novels that Higgins wrote. So he understands it. He grew up. He understands the structures of crime on this level, as he has investigated and prosecuted them himself, but Also, he grew up in Boston, so he understands the whole kind of milieu of where both his novel and the film was placed. But he didn't have anything to do with the movie itself. Paul Monash, who was a writer, both wrote and produced this Friends of Eddie Coyle, the screenplay. According to Yates, again, the book is a distant memory to me, but much of the dialogue from the book is used in the movie. Now and I have to also mention the film score here by David Grusin, who is a jazz musician, and it's certainly a very effective score. We get Peter Yates has a commentary from, I think, the early 2000s, and it's very good. He's very good at remembering the making of the film, his relationship with Robert Mitchum, who he thought was just a fantastic movie star actor. He really enjoyed working with him. Mitchum could be very he could be difficult at times, but he was very supportive. He took his acting roles very seriously and was very supportive of his fellow players. He would always be there for the close-ups of the other actors, and you can see the way he tries to develop relationships, especially with Peter Boyle and Richard Jordan in this film. They're the crucial scenes in the film. Ken Jones, nice robust booklet. This is a Criterion release, and you get a nice robust booklet here. And we get a really good essay. That's The Bank Robbery in Progress, essay by Ken Jones, They Were Expendable. We get a excerpt from a long article, I believe it was from Rolling Stone magazine, and it was written by Grover Lewis, and which he was on set and had interviews with many of the cast members and crew, and particularly with Robert Mitchum. And this is just great. This essay was called "The Last Celluloid Desperado." If you get this film, if you get this Criterion Blu-ray, definitely have to read this. This is what new journalism was like in 1973. And when you read it and you listen to Mitchum in this interview, and the prodigious amount of alcohol that Mitchum was consuming every night, and just his really strange his strange view of life, and but you wonder how he could ever have performed as well, because he doesn't even look hungover in these scenes. I mean, he looks really good. But I have to show you this one picture, because Peter Boyle says, you know what the 2001 theme is? That's the sound of Mitchum waking up. Peter Boyle and Mitchum got along very well, both on set and off. So how did the movie do? It had 4 stars from Roger Ebert. He gave a lot of movies 4 stars in this era. Vincent Canby in the New York Times gave it a rave review. For the most part, I think the part of the movie that people, some of the criticism of the movie, that it strayed too far away from Mitchum. As they say, he was only in the movie about 50% of the time, so what is ostensibly the story of Eddie Coyle, the tragedy of Eddie Coyle, is somewhat diminished by some of the emphasis on the bank robberies and some of the other characters. But at the time, it didn't make. I was trying to recall my own reaction to the Friends of Eddie Coyle in '73. I had a 10 best list of '73 that I made up because I was really into list making back in 50 years ago. It did not make my top 10 list, and I think it probably, that criticism of the film is Mitchum is so good. He has such a presence in the screen. He carries so much of movie history, of film noir of 50 years ago. And you just want more of him. And I think there's somebody said that his tragedy is just sort of every day, and maybe that is the point of the film. So yet another really thought-provoking, cinematic history context kind of movie from '73 that I'm really enjoying. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.